Year 3103, approximately 9 years earlier. Near Magao Cave's historic site, Western Gansu District, Old China. Why do we have to hike when the transport could have taken us all the way there, I heard. I thought about ignoring the whiny teenager. He was one of the newer kids to join my rotating group and had only been with us the past 3 days. He was still learning how I conducted these historical educational excursions. Solomon, or Saul for short, wasn't a bad kid, just a bit lazy. I thought about how to handle this. Context, Saul, context. To understand the true history of the area, you need context. By hiking the local area where we are conducting our survey, we can better understand the motivations and experiences of those who once lived or traveled here. Also, if that is not a good enough reason, your shell needs the exercise, I explained. Therese chuckled. She was my assistant for this expedition. Listen to the man, Solomon. Look around you and enjoy the beauty. Try to imagine what it was like to have lived here 1,000 years ago. Or even further back to 3,000 years ago when the caravans were crawling down this ravine carrying their loads of silk to the west. I smiled at the young woman. Not only was Therese a true fan of history and possessed a brilliant mind, but she was also gorgeous. Her shell was still her original and not yet 30 years old. Why she graced my tent with her company most nights, I could never understand. But I did know that my 50-year-plus shell loved her company. Despite its age, I was not ashamed of my shell. I worked hard to keep it in great shape, but there was still the difference of 1.5 centuries between our true mental ages to consider. Still, I was weak to her dusky and youthful charms. Her shell's genetic lines were easily traced back to her great-grandmother, Tashira Purohit. Tash had been one of the original template colony humans and had taken shelter in a bunker in India during the reset. Someday I'd have to ask Therese which colony her ancestor had settled in. Solomon accepted the answer enough to stop his complaining. The 7 other teenagers kept their grumbling to themselves, though a few looked like they were happy with the exercise. I had a strict policy of no virtuality, except for 1/2 hour before bedtime. This upset most of the kids as they now had to endure the physical exertion without being able to escape into the digital realm and leave their augments to deal with their bodies. My policies preventing that were making them face the brunt of the hike. Feel the burn, baby. On the other hand, the policy was also letting them experience things in the real world and see things of great beauty that were more and more overlooked in this modern era. I let Therese take the lead as I pulled off to the side of the trail to see how my charges were doing. Solomon had been behind me and frowned as he trudged past. Behind him was a girl a year younger than he was. She was also his sister and had joined the class at the same time Saul had. "You are doing great, Tamar," I said to the much quieter young girl. "Thanks, sir. Please don't mind my brother. He always complains about the chores," Tamar said, giving me a shy smile as she passed. "Just John, remember? Sir makes me look over my shoulder," I reminded the girl, triggering a blush. From the glances and looks I had been getting from her, I suspected the girl was infatuated with my fame. It was likely that she was the driving force that saw the siblings join our class belatedly a week after we had set out. I hoped I lived up to her preconceptions of that John Prime celebrity. Solomon and Tamar Modesto were the first siblings to ever attend my class together. I set the lower age range for inclusion at 14, which meant that most of my students were post-BM. For the pair to be traveling together as brother and sister meant that it was likely they had either not yet taken the base maturity tests or that they hadn't passed them. But it could also have been that they simply liked each other enough to stay together after they had been tested into adulthood. I never bothered to verify their BM status as I had no intention of pursuing anything requiring adult consent with either of them. I'd like to say that this was because of firm convictions on my part regarding the lines between teachers and students. But sadly, the truth was that it had happened a few times in the past on previous learning expeditions. I'd been weak and fallen for the charms of a few of the more eager, older female students. Hey, I may be a prude from the past at times, but I was not stupid. Behind the Modesto siblings came the foursome of our party. Their pod was made up of 2 males and 2 females, and they were clearly a tightly bonded group. Dia and Fidel were the 2 boys. They were both 17. Fidel gave me a smile as they passed. He and Dia were holding hands, and they looked happy. The 2 girls in the group, Karima and Amissa, followed. They were 16 and 18 respectively and were currently busy chatting and laughing. I smiled as I thought of the group. They were all clearly bisexual, as I had seen all the possible combinations in their public displays of affection. Sometimes their tent became a bit too rowdy and festive during the nights, which triggered an automatic implant admonishment for excessive noise levels. Despite that, they were all good kids, and their tests showed that they were learning what they needed to from the expeditions. Let them have their fun. The final two students in the group were Clark and Darian. Clark was a 16-year-old male whose shell was tall, lean, and very dark, well beyond the mean of the tailored genetics of this age. I recalled he had grown up in Saharan Africa, and his shell had probably been tailored for the solar exposure of the region. Darian was the polar opposite of Clark. She was 17, had a very pale complexion, and a slightly rounded and compact shell. I could not recall if she grew up in Norway or Iceland, but it was definitely a former Scandinavian country. Maybe Greenland? Yes, that was it. Eastern Greenland. The two were friendly to each other and the rest of the group, but were clearly more focused on learning what the expedition had to offer and less so on their relationships with their peers. I had seen them sharing the same tent a few times over the past few weeks, but they also mingled and interacted with the others. I had noticed that Clark had spent some time in a tent with the new girl Tamar, just last night while Darian and Saul had chatted by the fire. Even though the younger girl Tamar had likely not yet passed her BMs, the others in the group were close enough to her age so as to not trigger any oversight from the morality sub from Unconscientia. Regardless, the teens were both happy the next morning, so all had been fine. My assistant Teresa had once spent a night with Clark and had commented that he was a great lover despite his young age. I had just replied that I would not and did not want to know, which had caused her to giggle. Omu formed the tail end of the group. The android was a dozen paces behind and waved for me to get back in line before she passed. I nodded and did just that, focusing both on the slippery rocks of the ravine and Darian's striking blonde-white hair bobbing down the ravine just ahead of me. Okay, maybe it was not just her hair that caught my eye. Please use caution as we continue to descend the ravine. When it is safe, please take a moment to observe the worn, switchback trails off to our left. This was the original route of the road between the 2nd and 5th centuries. The rocky remains at the far end are thought to have been a toll-taking structure, as the cost to maintain the switchbacks would have been non-trivial. Omu was in charge of most of the learning portions of the expedition. The android could use the implants to directly relay information to the hiking humans no matter how separated they were. This ensured everyone heard and no one had to shout. The kids were also able to subvocally ask follow-up questions without worry about interrupting or talking over each other. If the questions were pertinent to the entire group, the android would automatically propagate the questions and answers to all. I saw my students bunching up behind Therese as she stopped their movement to point out the various features that Omu had just explained. While our progress was paused, I leaned against an outcropping and took out my condensing canteen. I noticed its power charge was down to half, but it was mostly refilled to the level it had been at when I had last drunk from it an hour ago. As I stood drinking, I spotted one of our circling aerial drones. I turned to look for our ground defense bots and saw one of the quadruped mobile units at the top of the ravine behind us. Another was already at the bottom waiting for our arrival, so that left the 3rd and 4th units somewhere in the hills on our flanks. Omu caught up to where I stood. She spoke to me verbally, causing her implant-delivered lessons with the kids to be cut off. "How are you doing, John?" I detect an elevated heart rate. "I'm fine, Omu. These trips are getting a bit harder as my shell ages," I replied. "I will give you a massage tonight if you wish," my oldest friend said. Therese could not come close when it came to a deep tissue therapeutic massage. I suspected she would end up receiving one from the android as well. The teenagers wouldn't miss out as they were young enough to not need a massage. Besides, I was sure they would be busy with other forms of muscular exertion and release. "How much longer do we have to go, Omu?" "I have chosen a wooded area down near the river just below the cave complex as our campsite. It is just over a kilometer beyond the bottom of this descending ravine." I looked at the late afternoon sun. We would still have plenty of daylight when we arrived at the camp. I wondered if there was enough clean water in the river for a decent swim. This area was mostly dry desert. The hills and ravines coming down from the steppes were mostly bare rock and brush. Off in the valley below, I could see sand dunes among areas of rock and scrub. Speckled in the low-lying areas of the dune were the occasional splashes of green. Omu had explained that Eudaimonia's geology subpresence had been busy over the past century, installing water evaporators and using them to irrigate new oases all across the desert. Given enough time, the spreading gobi would be tamed, and the sands would begin to retreat. Ironically, this location would see minimal green forming, as the dry cliffs were historic and also helped preserve the cave system. How's the river look? Any areas suitable for a swim? The aerial drone reconnaissance shows some areas which appear deep and clean enough for swimming. Also, recent biological surveys of the Averill have detected no dangerous reptiles in this river system. There are larger catfish, but not so large as to cause harm. I smiled at the thought of teaching the kids to noodle a catfish. Probably not. The intake hoses have already been laid to the Vito L, and the pumping station is already busy filtering and storing enough water for hot showers for the entire party. I also have the auto kitchen set up and fabricating foodstuffs for the evening meal, the android said. I could not remember what was on our menu for tonight, and I did not ask so that it would be a surprise. It would invariably be something that had once been locally eaten, all towards the goal of a complete historical education experience. Tell me they drank normal alcohol here? I asked, shuddering a bit at the distilled alcohol drink made from yak milk we had to endure at our camp from a week ago. The enhanced beverage choice for tonight will be Guki Ju, which is made from goji, also known as wolfberries. From your past reactions to other similar drinks, I anticipate that you will enjoy it, Omu said. With the lectures, questions, and answers taking place at the front of the column now concluded, the group began moving again. My implant began relaying the group's discussion again now that I had stopped my in-person conversation with Omu. Over the next 15 minutes, we continued our gradual descent of the ravine. We were in shadow now as the ravine turned towards the north, and I put my shirt back on against the cooler conditions. Once we hit the valley floor and the riverbanks, the temperature dropped a few degrees further. I saw the teenagers also putting on their shirts. I put on my enhancement glasses to review the map of the area and saw that the cave complex was off to the right of us. The main entrance to the caves was on the southeastern side of the river, against the rising ground we had just descended. The river was lined on both sides with clusters of trees and grass, and it was to one of these green spaces that we were headed. I spotted the camp and the VTOL transport aircraft parked nearby. There were also 4 tents already set up, and a portable toilet and shower cubicle. Between that and the small toilet on the VTOL, we had enough capacity for the whole group, with the aircraft toilet providing some privacy. We began the final stretch across the flatter sandy region between the hills behind us and the river ahead. Our pace picked up at the thought of a cool swim, followed by a hot meal. The water would be warm, but that would be perfect as the desert temperatures dropped quickly as the sun set. I had to laugh as the happy foursome bypassed the camp and instead began stripping out of their clothing as they ran to the river. The rest of us were patient enough to first go to the camp and get towels and swim shoes before we also stripped and joined them. Omu did cleanup duty and picked up the clothing strewn across the sand. Our supper meal had been stewed camel meat over a wheat noodle base. There were also carved melon chunks with a sweet goat cheese sauce. It was a hit, and we all ate our fill. As Omu predicted, I loved the fermented wolfberry alcoholic beverage. After supper, we had a jam session around an evening fire. Instead of a wood fire, the equipment on the VTOL had provided a nice gas fire and an improvised rock fire pit. Tamar played a mean synth fiddle. Amissa tooted her flute, and Clark banged an amplified membrane drum. The rest of the teens danced and sang. The songs were a mix of contemporary covers of songs from the 1960s. For some reason, that era struck a chord with today's youth. Having English as the sole universal language meant that much of pre-reset Western culture had the advantage of being adopted by the newer generations. After a third shot of wolfberry tonic, I began to dance with Therese. My older shell did not allow me to do the twists as fast or the bends as deep as I would have liked, but we still had fun. Later, when the party wound down, all the teenagers went off to enjoy their daily limited allowance of virtuality. Therese abandoned me to do the same, so I sat by the fire with just Omu for company. We watched the stars and the visible moving satellites and space stations. I'd try to guess which ones were which, and Omu would correct me. After 20 minutes, I decided to take a long shower and go to bed. In our tent, I got undressed and adjusted the small aircon unit to compensate for the cool evening. Therese joined me after her own shower, and after checking to make sure all the teens were in agreeable groupings in the remaining 3 tents. She reported that tonight had been drama-free, which I was happy to say was normal. Omu would be standing watch all night, and the 4 patrolling mobile units would ensure our camp was undisturbed. Therese and I made love before turning in for the night. I was very tired from today's hike, and Therese rose far earlier than I did to get the camp going in the morning, so we both fell asleep quickly. I woke once in the middle of the night to use the toilet. The camp was quiet, and Omu reported everything was secure, so I was quickly back to bed and once again in dreamland. The next day, after a hearty morning breakfast, Therese and I led our eager students up to the cliff face and to a restored entrance that led into the Mangowa Caves complex. Of those caves or chambers that had survived the reset 1100 years ago, there were now over 24 that had been cleared by mobile units and restored to viewable status. The rest were either still buried by shifting sands or had been filled in by erosion during the past millennia and likely lost to time. The entry of the first cave was a newer tunnel about 12 meters long. The sides and top of the tunnel were chemically hardened earth. We had to go through an airlock to enter, as the environment inside was kept as clean and dry as possible. Inside, we found an amazing mix of history. Parts of this cave had been open to tourism in the 20th century, while the original cave was almost 2 millennia older. This meant that there was an 1100-year-old outer restored area with modern toilets, to me, and a gift shop, all empty, that lead to the deeper sections filled with various statues of Buddha and the intricate and beautiful murals that covered most of the walls. One of the old toilet rooms was even in working condition, as the mobile units had repaired the plumbing and attached a reduction unit and a small water purifier recycler into the short loop between the drain and the water supply. I had to smile as the giggling kids just had to try the old-style water flushing mechanisms. The working toilets would make the job of preventing the kids from pissing in the corners so much easier. Although I had to admit that I doubted they would go against procedure to do such a thing. We spent the morning moving from cave to cave. They had been linked by a new climate-controlled underground gallery. We were the only humans here, which I had expected but had been unsure of, as the place was not exactly off-limits to the casual tourist or traveler, just lesser known. Even though the chambers we explored were well lit by ESU-powered emitter arrays, I was also wearing my enhancement goggles. Omu had been projecting digital images and video overlays onto many of the ruins, which the kids and Therese were able to view with their smart irises. I was using the goggles to follow along, as my older shell did not have the fancy gadgets. After a lunch break, the group split up into smaller development units. What that basically meant was that a few of the kids were seeking more than just a history lesson. The youngest girl, Tamar, was a budding artist and wanted to sketch a few of the Buddha statues. She had even had the VTOL produce the equipment and art supplies needed to create an oil painting. Amissa was also interested in anthropology and wanted to dig deeper into the lifestyles of those who built the caves in the first place. Omu was going to work with her for the next few hours and do renderings which approximated the original living conditions and works of the cave builders. Clark wanted to take high-resolution scans of some of the statues. Besides history, he was also studying interior design and wanted to use the various Buddhas as possible focal points in his future commissions. While those 3 were busy with their additional activities, the other 5 teenagers returned to the surface to explore the exterior areas of the caves and maybe have an early afternoon swim in the river. Therese was keeping an eye on them to ensure that they did not get into trouble. I was enjoying my time out of the desert sun and was keeping an eye on the 3 who were still in the cave complex pursuing their additional tasks. First, I helped Clark as he set up scanners on the various statues he wanted to record. He wanted both full and false color digital renderings, so I had to help move special lighting to even out the illumination in some of the chambers. After Clark was done needing my help, I took a break in the chamber where Tamar was busy sketching. She said she didn't mind if I watched her work, so I sat by the back wall where I could see her drawing. She was very good, and I was impressed by her early talent. We even chatted now and then as she got over her shyness. We were in a deeper chamber, and the Buddha statue was in a reclining pose. This was the last of the restored chambers in this area. There were narrow passages leading deeper into the cave system, but they had not been cleared by the AI, and some were even partially filled with sand. Suddenly all hell broke loose. Emergency! Emergency! This is Therese. We have had an accident up on the hillside. Some of the students have fallen into a sinkhole that opened up underneath them. Omu must have been broadcasting Therese's message to everyone. I began to rise to my feet. At the same time, I detected the flickering of sunlight in one of the passages, which led deeper into the complex, and heard a rumbling. I am on my way. Stand by, I heard Omu respond. I heard the distant echoing sounds of the android's metallic feet running out of the cave system. Tamar put down her sketchpad and looked at me with a shocked expression. What should we do, John? She asked. I had been about to run after Omu. Just wait here for a moment until we find out what exactly is happening. Omu will get there quickly, I replied. As I was telling Tamar that I noticed that there was a cloud of dust spewing out of the tunnel, which I had seen the flickering light. I put on my enhancement goggles and turned up the gain. Yes, I saw a brightness. The sinkhole must be above one of the deeper caves just beyond this one. Dia is here with me. Darian, Fidel, Karima, and Saul fell down into the sinkhole when it collapsed. We need help. The hole is getting bigger, and we are starting to slide. I could easily tell it was Therese in the implant message. It somehow sounded like her, and I could tell she was frantic. I am almost there. 2 of the perimeter quadruped mobile units will also arrive shortly. Stand by. John, please assemble Tamar, Clark, and Amissa. We may need their assistance. I have set the replicators on the VTOL to begin creating climbing rope and earth excavation utensils. Omu sent only to me. We need to go find Clark and Amissa, I told Tamar. Did you hear? Solomon fell in a hole. Is he all right? Tamar asked, not hearing my instruction. Just then I heard someone yelling faintly. It was coming from the tunnel leading deeper into the caves. Someone's in there. I think it was Saul, Tamar said as she began running towards the dark passage. Shit! Hold on, Tamar, I yelled, but the girl had already left the chamber. I mentally triggered my implant while speaking my thoughts. Clark, Amissa, this is John. Go out to the VTOL now and get the ropes that are being fabricated. Take them to Omu if she needs them. Hurry! Dia just slid into the hole. I can't hold on much longer, I heard Therese yelling via my implant. More dust was spewing from the tunnel as I entered behind the girl. Tamar's thermal outline was visible ahead in my goggles' enhanced view. I see someone, Tamar yelled back to me. She then started coughing from the dust. Be careful! Wait for me! This cave could collapse at any time, damn it! I yelled back. She ignored me, probably only thinking about her brother. I heard her yelling her brother's name. I triggered my implant again. Oh, Moo, what's happening up there? I have arrived at the sinkhole, John. The mobile units have also just arrived. I should be able to use them to save Teresa. I will anchor one to a stable rock and use the other to chain my way down to her current position. She sounded busy. Damn it! I was unsure what to do, so I kept moving after Tamar. The next cave was half full of sand, so I kept to the side with clearance. Tamar was still visible about 10 meters ahead and already in the next short passage leading to an even deeper cave. I saw her suddenly kneel to check on someone. I found Karima. She's bleeding. I think she's knocked out or something, the young girl yelled. I kept moving through the soft sand heading for the next passage. I triggered my implant again. Oh, Moo, Tamar and I are in a deeper cave. The sinkhole opened up into the complex down here. She thinks she has found Karima and says that she is hurt bad. John, please proceed no further. The risk of a collapse is too great. Karima and Fidel are dead. Their implants registered cerebral suspension moments after they fell. I am still detecting life signs from Darian, Dia, and Solomon. All appear to have suffered various injuries, although Solomon's vitals appear strongest. I heard a male voice yelling for help. That must be Solomon. Tamar, Omu reports that Solomon is still alive. Karima is gone, though. Leave her and come back out of that cave. I'll get your brother and the rest. I saw her hesitating as she bent over Karima's body. Large stones and gravel were tumbling down a large mound just behind her and rolling by them on both sides. There was an occasional bright flash in the dust as the opening in the ceiling of the cave cleared enough to let the topside sunlight spill inside. I entered the larger cave and met Tamar coming towards me. I think they are on the left side. I thought I heard Saul yelling from the back left corner. Stay back in the connecting tunnel unless I call for you. This cave could collapse completely at any moment, I yelled. Thankfully, the panicked 15-year-old girl did exactly as I asked. I tightened the enhancement goggles on my head and worked my way around the perimeter of the dusty chamber. Gravel and sand continued to pour down from the now clogged opening in the ceiling. The conical mound of rubble below the opening mostly filled the cavern and was nearly 4 feet deep where it met the side walls. I worked my way around to the left side of the cave where Tamar had said that she had heard Saul yelling. In the thermal goggle view, the mound of debris was much brighter than the cave walls and ceiling. This meant that the material had recently fallen from the warmer surface. I hugged the left cave wall as tightly as I could and climbed through the sand and gravel. The dust was choking, so I pulled my shirt up over my mouth to gasp cleaner air. I have reached Therese and am attempting to pull her back up the pit. Where are you, John? Omu said into my head. I'm busy. Can't talk, I subvocalized back. I made it over the deepest portion of gravel and sand. This was near the middle of the cavern's edge, and climbing the mound had me almost touching the ceiling. Ahead, in the far left corner, I saw the heat of a body. It was moving and I heard it crying. Saul! I scrambled down into the far corner, pushing a wave of sand ahead of me. Shit, I might bury the poor kid. I tried to move more carefully, but still the sand slid. I realized that most of it was coming from the chamber ceiling and not me, so I moved faster. He would be buried whether I continued on or not. Help me! I'm hurt and I can't see, the poor kid wailed. He jumped when I grabbed his shoulder. I worked my way around behind him and heaved, managing to get him mostly pulled above the rising sand. Luckily, he was shallowly buried laying horizontally and not standing upright. I'd have never been able to pull him out if that had been the case. Oh! Ow! Ow! The 16-year-old cried out. He must have broken ribs or legs. I'm sorry, Saul. I know it hurts, but I'm going to get you out of here. I pulled with all my strength and got him free of the gravel. Now I had to get him back up the slope I had just come down. I was worried because the more I struggled, the more material I shifted. This in turn caused more sand and gravel to fall down from the nearly full center of the chamber. Inch by inch, we made it up the loose cone of sand and gravel. While I did that, I also scanned around through the dusty dark room, looking for the thermal traces of the other two kids. I thought I saw a hot flash near the middle of the far end of the chamber. It was not moving, so I had no idea if it was Darien or Dia. I realized grimly that it could even have been Fidel's body. With the way the material was falling into the cavern, it was lucky that Saul and Karima had slid to the edges of the pile where we could find them instead of being buried under the main mass of spoil. John, you must move clear of the unstable chamber and return to the cleared areas. I am now detecting that Dia has also expired. Darian's body functions are fading fast. I assume that all the students who entered the pit are down near your current level. I am sending the mobile units on ahead to you, and I will be following as rapidly as I can. Therese is safe but shaken. I have instructed her to go to the Vattel and take charge of Clark and Amissa. Fuck! 3 kids already dead, and another one likely dying somewhere under this pile. I needed to get Saul back to the safe passage and go look for Darian. Saul was still alive because he was moaning constantly. With a shove, I pulled him past me and heaved him over the lip of the gravel, sending him tumbling and sliding down the other side towards the exit end of the cave. John, are you all right? I am detecting an extremely fast heart rate, and your blood oxygen levels are falling. Please answer me. I'm all right, Omu. I found Saul and am busy pulling him from the collapsing cave. Can't talk now, I managed to choke out and sub-vocalize. Stay clear of the danger area, John. Please, you must stay clear. The mobile units are nearing the tunnel complex entry point now. They should arrive in less than a minute. I will be right behind them. I am bringing the trauma pack from the camp. I have instructed Therese, Clark, and Amissa to bring the portable excavation equipment when they can. Naomi is also coordinating a fast response rescue team. Stay clear. Larger chunks of the cavern's soft stone ceiling were beginning to come loose and fall. I scrambled around to the front of Saul's body to pull him the final distance down the slope and towards the safer tunnel where Tamar was hopefully still waiting. The boy was still conscious when I resumed pulling as I felt him stiffen in pain. Just then a large chunk of ceiling stone fell and impacted my right knee, knocking me off my feet as it did. Fuck, that hurt. I let out a shout of pain and hissed in a deep breath through clenched teeth. The chamber roof was beginning to fail faster, and I realized I had better get Saul out quickly, or neither one of us was going to make it. I heaved myself back to my feet, having to put most of my weight on my left leg. I pulled Saul as hard as I could, and we fell down the slope all the way to the front corner of the rectangular cavern. "Tamar, come help me pull your brother out of here. We don't have much time," I yelled to the girl. "John, Darian has also just expired. I am sorry. The mobile units are past the second chamber now." "Shit!" Tamar's thermal signature appeared in front of me in the dust. She immediately began to help me pull Saul. We were now near the rise of loose stone and sand, which was almost blocking the exit portal. Wham! A large stone fragment knocked me in the head. Stunned, I dropped to the gravel floor. "John," the girl cried. "Kurt pull your brother ooh," I said groggily. I felt the wetness from the blood seeping down the side of my face. Just then, one of the quadruped mobile units scrambled over the rubble at the entry and entered the chaotic, collapsing chamber. It had bright lights shining from shoulder mounts, and these lit up the dust. My goggles switched to true vision, and I could make out a dirty Tamar pulling on the bloody body of her brother. He was moving his head back and forth but was not seeing anything, as his eyes were ruined or covered with quickly swelling facial bruises. Stone and gravel continued falling, and my legs were being buried quickly. I struggled to free myself with my hands while trying to remain conscious. The mobile unit moved behind me and began shoving rubble off of my legs. "No! Save the kids!" I managed to gasp out. The mobile unit ignored my plea and just kept digging. "John, you are injured." "I am almost there." I heard "oh moo" in my head. Tamar was pulling with all her might, but she could not move her brother up the sliding gravel near the entry. The second mobile unit scrambled past her, causing her to slide back down, leaving her lying near her brother. "No, God damn it, save the kids! Don't worry about me," I managed to cough out. The chamber was collapsing faster now, and the rumbles and grinding were constant. I think the main roof was letting loose all the way. The first mobile unit stopped digging and braced itself against the wall and floor, forming a bridge over my legs and lower back. The second one joined it and protected my upper body as best it could. More gravel and rocks fell and buried the first mobile unit completely. I felt my legs being compressed, but I did not feel the pain of them being crushed. "The boy and girl! You fucking—" I managed to whisper out. Bam! Another fucking rock hit me in the back of the head. It was a glancing hit, but it almost knocked my goggles completely off my face. Ouch, that hurt. I tried to focus my eyes, and I managed to get them open just in time to see a large chunk of ceiling stone fall right on Saul's lower back. He stiffened in shock and grunted out a burst of air, ejecting a huge gout of blood onto his sister. "Damn it! Saul!" Tamar screamed. She had managed to climb to her hands and knees and was trying to pull her brother by his shoulders. The rocks and sand continued to fall. Just then, Omu slid down the loose rubble and stopped next to us. "John, you are hurt. Can you speak?" "Oh, Mo, you fucking machine. Get the girl out of here now," I thought. What the hell was the android doing? "Girl," was all I managed to gasp out. I saw Omu quickly look over the brother and sister. The android then ignored them and turned back to me, reaching out quickly and placing the goggles back on my eyes properly. It then pulled out a respirator mask and air unit and fitted that against my nose. "The unit is set to pure oxygen, John. Breathe shallowly." I was stunned, simply fucking gobsmacked. What in the hell was the android doing? Was it damaged? I concentrated to sub-vocalize and managed to get out. "Naomi. Something wrong with Omu. Omu will protect you, John. You are injured. Help is on the way. Hold tight. Motherfu—" I was interrupted from my rage by Tamar screaming. "Oh, Saul, ow, oh, John, ow, owie," the girl cried over and over as the rocks fell faster, pummeling her. Omu moved quickly forward and covered my head and shoulders with her android body. She was bracing herself on her knees in one arm. The other arm had the trauma kit tucked near my head. More gravel and sand flowed around us. I felt the hot warmth of the android's body. It must have run to the cave at maximum speed and nearly overheated. I also felt the jolts in both the androids and the mobile units as they absorbed the blows from the larger falling rocks. The steady shocks were timed almost exactly to the cries of pain the girl next to me was making. I began to feel a rage so great that I began to shake. Solomon's life signs have ended. Tamar's are falling fast. I heard from my implant. I was not sure if that had come from Omu or Naomi. I began to realize that maybe there had never really been a difference between the two after all. Through the sounds of falling rock and rubble, I heard a faint, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," being repeated over and over by Tamar. Oh my God, this was a fucking nightmare. I began to shudder as a racking sob began to rattle in my chest. My head was exploding from both my wounds and the adrenaline. I felt Omu moving its free hand around, probably searching in the trauma kit. "You are in distress, John. I will give you a sedative." I tried to surge upward, but was too pinned by machines and gravel to move anything, even my head. The faint sounds of Tamar calling out to her dad were fading. I suddenly felt a wiggling movement near my head, which must have been her foot kicking and struggling against the deepening sand and gravel. Omu managed to retract her arm, painfully scraping my ear in the process. I felt it trying to apply something to my neck. I could not twist my head away. Soon a cool sensation spread from the spot. The pressure on my body increased a bit, and I realized that the sound of the falling rock and gravel was lessening. Either I was being buried too deeply to hear the falling rocks, or the chamber was full. A few seconds later, I felt the last of Tamar's kicks. I felt myself calm as the drugs Omu had given me began to take effect. It must have just been a mild sedative as I remained conscious. I realized that with my head injuries, putting me under fully out was not the best idea. Tamar has now expired, I heard deepening the nightmare. I was still able to breathe, not that it mattered much as I felt dead inside. Soon the chamber became fully quiet with only the noise of my breathing and my beating heart to keep my company. I did hear the frantic communications between Therese and Omu Naomi as they coordinated the activities outside the cave. Therese tried to talk to me repeatedly, but I just ignored her. Omu relayed to her that I was alive. That was wrong. I was dead. Well, not physically dead, just dead inside. There was something slowly growing inside me, like a hot ember slowing rising and becoming a burning forge fire. What I was feeling inside was definitely growing, and it was ugly. The ugly of pure hatred and rage.